New Mexico Territory, June 1874. The sun had already begun to sink behind the Sangre de Cristo Mountains when Elira Lanton stepped out of the mercantile with nothing in her hands but a single loaf of bread wrapped in brown paper. Her wedding dress was gone. She had folded it carefully, lace yellowed from years in the trunk, and laid it in Mr. Bixby's hands like it was nothing more than calico. He had not asked questions. Folks in Taos had learned not to. Elira clutched the bread to her chest and walked fast, boots hitting the packed dirt of the main street. Her cheeks were hot, but not from the June air. She had not worn the dress when she married. There had been no wedding, not really. Just a man with a sharp temper and a fast fist, and a preacher who looked the other way. That man was gone now, left her and their daughter for the gun trade down in Chihuahua. Elira did not miss him. What she missed was the food she could no longer afford. She turned down the alley behind the blacksmith shop and ducked into a narrow adobe house where her 7-year-old daughter lay sleeping on a straw mattress. "Olaya," she whispered, brushing a dark curl from the girl's forehead. "Mama got bread." The girl stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Real bread, real bread." Elira smiled and tore the loaf in half. "Eat slow." They sat on the floor, knees touching, chewing small bites while the cicadas sang outside. That was when the knock came. She froze. No one came here unless they wanted something. She set the bread down and stood, heart thudding. "Who is it?" she asked through the door. "Name's Rylan Eaves," came a voice, low and calm. "My horse threw a shoe. I was told the blacksmith is your neighbor." Elira cracked the door just enough to see him. A man stood there in trail dust, one hand on the brim of a sweat-stained hat. He looked to be about 30, with sun-browned skin and a scar across his jaw that vanished into a short, neat beard. His eyes were steady. "The smith's gone until morning," she said. He nodded. "Figured." "Is it all right if I water my horse from the trough?" She hesitated, then opened the door wider. "Go ahead." He gave a small, grateful nod and turned back into the dusk. Elira watched him cross to the trough, his boots crunching gravel. A tall bay gelding waited patiently, its flanks streaked with dried sweat. When he came back, he paused. "Sorry to bother you, ma'am. You live alone?" "No," she said quickly. "My daughter's here." Something passed across his face, something like understanding. "Well, I will not keep you. You two have a good night." "Wait," she said before she could think better of it. "Are you hungry?" He blinked. "I only have bread," she added, "but it is fresh." He hesitated. "Then, yes, ma'am." "Thank you." They sat outside on the step, passing the other half of the loaf between them while night fell slow and quiet. "You headed somewhere?" she asked. "Utah Territory. Heard they need cattle hands around Panguitch." "I do not much favor towns, but I needed a farrier." She nodded, eyes on her hands. "You been riding long?" "Since March. Left Texas after my father passed. Got no one left there." He looked at her. "You," Elira breathed deep. "My husband left. A year ago, took all we had and crossed south. Has not come back." "You waiting on him?" She shook her head. "I was hungry today, traded my wedding dress for this bread." He was quiet, then he said, "That is a hell of a trade." "I did not want the dress," she said, "but it still hurt." He looked at her differently after that. Not with pity, but with something else. Respect, maybe. "I have a bedroll," he said, voice low. "I can sleep out front if it makes you feel safer. I will be gone at first light." Elira hesitated, but she looked at Olaya, curled asleep again inside, then back at him. "All right," she said. He tipped his hat. "Thank you, ma'am." That night she did not sleep much, but not from fear. The next morning she found him already saddled and ready, standing beside his horse with the reins loose in his hand. "Thank you for the bread," he said. "And the kindness." Elira stepped out, shawl around her shoulders. Olaya peeked from behind her. "You heading to Panguitch?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." She looked down at her child. You got any reason to be back through here? He paused. No. But I could find one. Something in her chest lifted so sudden it almost hurt. She stepped forward, held out a small bundle, dried apples, for the trail. His fingers brushed hers when he took it. You take care of her. I will, she said. You take care of yourself. He mounted up and rode out slow, not looking back. But Elira stood there long after the dust had settled, her hands still warm where his had touched them. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. She did not expect him to return. But on the 22nd day, just as the sun dipped low and the wind stirred up dust from the street, a tall bay gelding came down the road. Rylan Eaves rode straight to her door and dismounted. You said you traded your wedding dress for bread, he said as she stepped outside. That should not be the end of your story. Her heart caught in her throat. What are you doing here? I went north, thought about you every mile. She stared at him, not daring to hope. I could go back to Utah, he said, or I could stay here. If you want me to. Elira looked at Olaya through the window, then back at the man in front of her. What are you offering, Rylan? He stepped closer. A vow, one you never dared dream, one I mean to keep. She felt tears rise but did not look away. Say it plain. He reached for her hand. I want a life with you. You and your girl. I will work, build, protect. I will love you, Elira, if you will let me. She opened her mouth, but no words came. So instead she stepped into him and wrapped her arms around his waist, burying her face in his shirt. He held her tight, like he had always meant to. And inside the house, Olaya smiled from the window. Love had come back on horseback, and this time it was staying. The adobe walls held the morning chill longer than the dirt outside, so Elira boiled water before the sun cleared the cottonwoods. She wrapped her shawl tighter and poured a ladleful into a tin basin, setting it near the hearth for Olaya. The girl sat cross-legged, washing her face with sleepy care while the rooster next door called out the hour. Through the cracked door, the scent of horse and leather drifted in. Rylan stood beside the fence he'd built the week before, tying a new length of barbed wire with methodical hands. He hadn't spoken of leaving since the day he returned. Elira watched him through the doorway, her hand still on the kettle. He didn't look toward her, but she noticed how he kept his body turned just enough that he could see the house from the corner of his eye. He'd been doing that since he came back, never hovering but never out of reach. Mama, Olaya whispered as she dried her face on her sleeve. Will Mr. Eaves stay forever? Elira crouched beside her. He hasn't said that, but he built a fence for our chickens. I know. He lets me hold the reins when he walks the horse. I know that too. Olaya leaned against her shoulder. I hope he stays. He's quiet like you. Elira kissed the girl's temple and stood. Finish your washing. I'll go see about the hens. She stepped out into the warming air, her boots catching dew along the edges of the yard. Rylan straightened when he saw her but didn't stop working. Elira, he said, voice low and even, didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. Olaya was up early. He gave a short nod, eyes on the wire as he cinched it tight. Something's been nosing around at night. I saw tracks by the coop. Coyote. Too wide, more likely a stray dog. He glanced at her then. I'll sleep out by the fence tonight just in case. You don't have to, I want to. She looked at the post he'd driven deep into the earth, the way he always left his tools coiled and clean. You ever think about settling down before this? He paused. Once, in Lampasas. I worked for a cattle man who had a daughter, thought we might suit. What happened? She married someone else. I wasn't what her family wanted. Elira folded her arms, the morning breeze tugging at her skirt hem. You're not the kind of man people forget. He met her eyes then. I don't want to be remembered, I want to be needed. She stepped closer. You are. He didn't reach for her. just stood there, the wire still taut in his hands, waiting like a man who'd been denied too many times to assume anything. "I'm not used to someone doing things for me," she said. "You don't owe me for any of it." "I know," she said, "but I still notice." He let the wire go then, letting it hum into place. "I've got enough lumber for a gate. Thought I'd build it this afternoon." She nodded. "That would be good." They stood there a moment longer, the silence between them not sharp, just full. Later, as the sun climbed and the world turned gold, Rylan dug post holes while Olaya sat nearby threading wildflowers into her braids. Elira worked behind the house, scrubbing linens in a galvanized tub. When she came around with a basket of wet clothes, she found Rylan crouched beside the girl, showing her how to fit the hinge into the gate frame. "She's clever," he said without looking up. "She likes to learn," Elira replied, setting the basket down on a flat stone. "She's sure-footed, don't spook easy." "She's had to be." He turned to her then. "She's going to be strong." Elira's eyes softened. "She already is." That night after supper, Olaya fell asleep with her head on Elira's lap while Rylan sat by the hearth, whittling a small piece of pine. His boots were off, his shirt sleeves rolled, and there was something quiet in the way he moved, like he'd found a place to rest without admitting it out loud. "What are you making?" Elira asked. "Horse, maybe, if I don't ruin the legs." "For her," he nodded. She ran her hand gently through Olaya's hair. "You don't have to do things to be worth something here." "I know," he said, eyes on the carving, "but it feels good to be useful. You are more than useful." Rylan looked up, and his face held a kind of stillness that hadn't been there before. "I want to ask you something, not tonight, but soon." Elira brushed a bit of ash from his shirt sleeve. "When you do, I'll be ready." He said nothing, only reached over and laid the half-finished carving beside her. It was rough still, but already the shape of a horse was there, its head bowed, its back strong. She looked at it, then at him, and knew whatever came next wouldn't be hurried, but it would be real. The first rain came in the night, soft and steady against the clay roof, soaking into the dry ground like a promise. Elira woke before dawn, listening to it, her hand resting on Olaya's back. The girl slept on, undisturbed. Outside the window, the world smelled cleaner, the dust tamed for a while. By mid-morning, Rylan was setting stones along the path to the front door, his shirt damp from the mist still hanging in the air. Elira handed him a cup of coffee, her fingertips brushing his as he took it. "You've been working since sunup," she said. "Helps me think." Her gaze drifted to the neat line of stones, each one set with purpose. "About what?" He sipped the coffee, then looked at her. "How to ask something that matters without rushing it. You're careful with everything," she said. "Even me." He studied her, rainwater glinting in his beard. "You've been hurt. I don't want to be another weight you carry." Elira looked down at the cup in her hands. The rim was chipped, but she kept it for its weight. "You're not." Rylan set his own cup aside and stood. "I've been wondering. If I built a house just there, past the cottonwoods, would you come with me? Not as a guest, as my wife." She didn't answer right away. The question opened something she hadn't dared let breathe. She looked toward the trees, then back to him. "Would Olaya have a room of her own?" she asked. "I'd build it first." Elira folded her arms, her voice quiet. "I've never had anyone ask what I wanted before. I'm asking now." She stepped closer, her eyes steady. "I want to say yes, but I need to know this isn't just kindness." "It isn't," he said. "You make this place feel like it's mine, too. That's not something I ever expected to find." She touched his arm, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then yes." Rylan didn't speak. He just reached for her hand and held it, long and sure. That afternoon, he rode into town to speak with Father Devereux, and Elira packed away the last of the dried apples she'd stored for winter. Olaya helped her fold linens, humming under her breath. "Are we moving?" the girl asked, not looking up. Not far, Elira said. Just past the trees. Will there be a porch? I think so. The girl smiled, then pulled a ribbon from her pocket and tied it around a folded sheet. He whistles when he works. I know. I like that. Elira smoothed the last cloth into place. So do I. By the time Rylan returned, the rain had passed. He carried a small satchel of nails and a spool of thread Elira had asked for. She met him at the door, her apron still dusted with flour. You talked to the priest? She asked. He'll come Sunday next. Elira nodded, her face calm, but her hands were trembling. Rylan saw it and stepped in, setting the satchel aside. Cold? He asked. No, she said. Just not used to this kind of good. He brushed a damp curl from her cheek. We'll get used to it together. That night, they didn't speak much. Olaya fell asleep with her head near the fire, and Elira sat beside her while Rylan carved in silence. The shape was clearer now, legs balanced, tail curled, a horse ready to run. When the flames burned low, Elira leaned against his shoulder. He didn't move, just let her rest there, as easy as breathing. Everything felt still but not empty, like the earth holding its breath before new growth, and when she closed her eyes, she did not dream of hunger or fear. She dreamed of cottonwoods and stone paths, and a gate that never needed locking. The morning sun stretched long shadows across the cottonwoods, and the sound of a hammer carried faintly through the trees. Rylan was setting joists for the roof beams, his shirt clinging to his back as he worked. A canvas tarp covered the new walls, and the scent of fresh-cut timber lingered in the air. Elira stood a few paces away with Olaya, watching the shape of their home take form. He's faster than I thought he'd be, Olaya whispered. He's building with his whole heart, Elira said, her voice quiet. Rylan noticed them and set the hammer down, brushing sawdust from his hands as he walked over. I was thinking, he said, might be time Olaya had a say in her room. The girl's eyes lit up. Can it have shelves? It can have whatever we make with our hands. She turned to Elira. Can I draw it? If you do, we'll follow it, Elira said. Rylan crouched down beside Olaya and said, You draw it, I'll build it. That's a promise. Later that day, Elira walked the length of the small pasture behind the new house, measuring the soil with her eyes. She knelt and pressed her fingers into the earth. Damp but not soggy. She could grow carrots here, maybe onions come spring. Rylan came up behind her and crouched beside her. You thinking of planting? He asked. I've never had ground of my own. Always borrowed, always shared. You got it now. You tell me where you want the fence, I'll run it. She looked at him, her face unreadable. You already built me a home. No, he said. I'm building us one. She nodded once and he stood with her. They walked the boundary together, marking the corners with small stones. That night, Rylan brought out a bottled dark glass, half full, and poured a small measure into 2 tin cups. I've been holding on to this since my father passed, he said, handing her one. Figured I'd know the right time. Elira studied the cup, then looked up at him. What made you think tonight was right? You were smiling when you looked at the house. First time I've seen that kind of smile from you. She raised her cup. To things we didn't expect. They drank, the liquor warm and biting. She coughed once, eyes watering, and Rylan laughed a low, surprised sound that made her laugh too. You didn't warn me, she said. I figured you'd handle it. They sat side by side on the porch steps, and after a while Rylan said, I never told you what my father did. He ran cattle, but he was a better stone mason than rancher. Built our house with his own hands. Elira turned to him. Did he teach you? He tried. I was more interested in horses than mortar. But I remember the way he measured everything twice, always twice. She rested her head against the wooden post beside her. My mother used to hum while she made bread. Same tune, over and over. I still hear it sometimes when I need dough." Rylan looked out over the darkened trees. "Funny how the people who leave still echo in the things we do." "They do." He glanced at her then. "You ever think about having more children?" He nodded. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I used to be afraid I couldn't. That man, my first husband. He didn't want more, and he made sure I couldn't ask." Rylan didn't flinch. He only waited. "But now," she said, "I think I might want to try, if that's something you'd want too." He took her hand, gentle and sure. "I'd raise a dozen with you if the Lord gave us that many. But even if it's just Olaya, that's already more blessing than I ever counted on." Elira leaned against his shoulder. The porch creaked beneath them, the night air cool but not cold. Inside, Olaya dreamed with the carved horse in her hands. And outside, Rylan and Elira stayed close, the space between them no longer full of waiting, but of choosing. The morning of the wedding, the wind came down from the mountains carrying the scent of pine and wet stone. Elira stood barefoot on the packed earth floor of the house she and Rylan would share, lacing the bodice of the dress she'd sewn from muslin dyed pale blue with elderberries. She'd stitched it in quiet hours after supper, the thread sometimes catching where her hands trembled from too much feeling. Outside, Olaya was chasing a hen that had gotten loose, her laughter sharp as flint in the air. Rylan was up by the spring, washing the trail dust from his face with water so cold it burned. He wore a white shirt she'd ironed the night before, the collar still stiff, his boots polished though scuffed from work. He wasn't used to dressing for ceremony, not that he needed it. The steadiness in him was ceremony enough. Elira stepped outside as Olaya ran past with the hen tucked under her arm. The girl stopped short when she saw her. "You look like the sky before sunrise," she said. Elira crouched and kissed her cheek. "Go wash your hands." The priest arrived just as the sun cleared the tops of the cottonwoods. He was older than most, with a crooked back and a voice that rasped like wind through dry grass. He said little, only nodded once when Rylan offered him water and again when Elira thanked him for coming. They stood beneath the frame of the porch. The roof wasn't finished, but the beams were strong and the view looked out over the small pasture, now fenced and waiting for spring planting. Olaya stood barefoot between them, holding a sprig of sage she'd tied with red thread. The priest cleared his throat. "You've come together not for words but for the work of building a life. That work is quiet, steady, it holds." Rylan took Elira's hands. "I will build with you. I will carry and mend and grow beside you. I'll never leave you wanting." Elira's voice didn't shake. "I'll walk beside you. I'll care for what we build and keep your name safe in my mouth." The priest nodded once. "Then that's done." Rylan kissed her, not quickly, not shy, the kind of kiss that sealed things like a door closing against a storm. Olaya clapped once, then leaned into her mother's side. That night there was no feast, but there was food. Beans with salt pork from the last trade, cornbread baked in a cast iron pan, and apples stewed with cloves. They ate on the porch steps, the three of them, passing the tin plates between them. Rylan had built a fire just beyond the house, and its glow painted their faces warm. After Olaya had fallen asleep beneath a quilt near the hearth, Rylan carried her to the small room she'd chosen, the one with shelves he'd built according to her drawing. He laid her down gently, tucking the quilt around her shoulders, and left the carved horse on the windowsill where the moonlight touched it. He found Elira sitting outside, her hands folded in her lap, the ends of her braid trailing over her shoulder. She didn't turn when he sat beside her. "I've been thinking," she said. "I never thought I'd feel safe enough to want more, but I do now." He reached for her hand, running his thumb over the ridge of a fresh scar near her knuckle, the mark of a splinter from a fence post. "What do you want? Chickens? A goat, maybe?" A second bed frame for when Olaya gets older and I want another child. She looked at him. If we can. He didn't answer right away. Then, we'll make room for everything. She turned to him, eyes catching the firelight. I want to grow old beside you. That's what I want most. He leaned in and brushed his lips against her temple. Then that's what we'll do. They sat in silence after that, watching the fire burn low. The wind had died down and the house behind them stood solid and quiet, its walls holding warmth. Months passed. The spring brought green shoots along the fence line and the first clutch of eggs in the nesting box. Rylan added a lean-to for the goat Elira had bartered for, and Olaya caught frogs in the irrigation ditch, her dress muddy to the knees. They planted carrots and onions and a few stalks of corn. When Elira's hands dipped into the soil that first planting day, she wept, though quietly with her back to the others. By autumn, her belly had softened with new life. Rylan built a cradle from cedar, the scent of it filling the house for weeks. He carved a small star at the head, the same shape Olaya had once drawn in the dirt with a stick. When the baby came a daughter with dark hair and a loud, even cry, Elira held her close and whispered, "You're born from hope, little one." That's a strong root. Rylan held them both, his heart too full for words. Olaya came in with a flower crown she'd made from late-blooming asters and placed it gently on her sister's head. Years stretched on, slow and full. The house grew with them, a second room, then a small loft. There were hard days, dry spells, a lost goat, a fever that took a week to break. But they faced each one together without fear. Elira taught her daughters to sew and read and listen for the weather and the wind. Rylan taught them to ride, to fix a fence, to trust their own hands. Olaya grew tall and sure, her laugh still sharp as flint, her gentleness saved for those who earned it. At night, after the girls were asleep, Elira and Rylan would sit on the porch, her head on his shoulder, his hand over hers. They never spoke of the lives they'd left behind. Only of what they were building now, timber by timber, season by season, and until the end of their days they kept building. Together. Always.